All right, everyone. So let's talk supernatural beings and occurrences. So, uh, on my channel, I talked about a lot of different kinds of entities, a lot of different kinds of experiences, and what I think that these entities and experiences are, and how I think about these things, how I come to my conclusions, things like that. If anybody wants to ask what you know any kind of being is or what kind of experiences I have, let me know. But I'm just going to kind of go into it if nobody asks. So, what I'm going to start off with is that everybody thinks about vampires, right? Everybody, everybody has an idea in their head of what a vampire is or what it isn't. Hold on, let me see if I can. Let me try something here. That is terrifying. Let's never do that again. No, that's awful. Let's go back to that. Let's try green, actually. How's green look on me? God, I look awful. Hold up. I think. Oh, that wasn't good either. Ooh, blue. Oof. Let's stick with red. Should have went with red the whole time. All right. By the way, not the best webcam I know. I'll get a better one soon. At any rate, vampires. So there's a lot of people who think that vampires don't exist at all. There's this term. I think it's called. It's not hemophagia. Hemophagia, I think, is when you're missing something in your blood. Anyway, there's this legal term for people who go blood crazy, like in a crime. When somebody drinks somebody else's blood, or wants to eat a piece of them, or thinks that they're a vampire. This term is, and that's going to drive me crazy. I'm going to have to look it up because God, I'm all lit up, aren't I? Green thought stuff down. All right. Let's look up the vampire legal. I'm not going to find it that way. All right. Well, let's not worry about that for now. But there's a legal term for it where if you want to eat somebody, you want to drink their blood, or if there's something to do with blood and there's a crime related to that. And it's more of psychiatrists think of it, and obviously lawyers think of it in a psychoanalytical kind of way, because I mean, you can't make a legal precedent for vampires existing or vampires being a thing, because that's not going to work in court. Um, so usually these people think that they're vampires, or they think that they need to drink blood for some reason. That if they don't, hey there, that if they don't drink blood, then they'll get weaker, they'll die, or something like that, or that they just have this craving that they need to satisfy for blood. I don't know what the legal term is. I'll have to look it up separately. I had it in my head before I started, but they'll usually psychoanalytically look at a person and be like, okay, this person thinks they need to drink blood. This person thinks that they have this craving, and because they think they have the craving, it kind of manifests in their psyche, and then it draws them to drink blood. Now that might be the case, for a lot of people, and that is something that happens. And most people would kind of leave it at that, not think that vampires actually exist, or like there's anything like a vampire, or there's some kind of creature or being that's a vampire. Um, there's a lot of people who might think I'm crazy for saying some of these things, but I'll kind of go into. I think vampires are a thing, but not like in the movies, and not certainly not like Twilight. I don't think they're glittery or sparkly. I don't think that's not a thing. Not even supernaturally. But uh, there's certain parts of our astral body that get cracked or fragmented, or there's some kind of, not necessarily a soul fragmentation like when somebody dies, but there's a lack in the astral body, and there's like this sucking nature to the astral body when it gets kind of cracked or harmed in this way. And it's not it's almost like it's seeking the energy that it doesn't have. When something happens to the astral body that it's seeking an energy that it doesn't have, and it wants to partake of another being's energy because it needs to fill that hole. It needs to fill that um, with somebody else's energy because it can't make that particular energy. Um, I read Michelle Bellinger's book on the Vampire Codex, or I think it was called the Psychic Vampire Codex. That's what it was. I actually did a video review on that, and I found some really great techniques in that. I learned a lot of energy techniques from that book. It was really good. And she talks about how vampires are naturally supposed to have this ability, this function in nature, in the natural order of things. They're not an aberration. They are meant. Also, if anybody watching wants to ask me questions, you can, and I will try to respond to everybody as well. It's the first live stream I've really done, but at any rate, there's blockages that people get along their spine, and these blockages can be anywhere along the spine. And what a vampire does is that they come in. They don't necessarily, now Michelle Bellinger's version and psychic vampires in general, because I think she's right about this. They don't need to necessarily drink your blood in order to clear those blockages, but they need to have an engagement with your energy. They need to do these various energy techniques, some of which she describes. So these blockages along your spine, along your chakras, if you will, a vampire can naturally take the energy out of those blockages, remove the blockages, take those blockages, feed themselves, and from that energy, from the blockages, and then that person's energy can flow more freely. But also, that vampire is fed, that psychic vampire is fed from the energy that builds up in those blockages and kind of gets stuck. Psychic vampires in that way, definitely a thing. As far as I'm concerned, take my opinion for what it's worth. So there's also sanguine vampirism. Sanguine vampires are the ones who actually drink blood. They physically drink their blood. Psychic vampires are the ones who just do energy techniques. There might be some skin contact. But there's always an engagement between the two energies. And I can describe some of these energies later. But a sanguine vampire will actually, drink somebody's blood. I've also done this technique too. But a sanguine vampire will drink somebody's blood and be able to use that as energy. Now, most people, when they drink somebody else's blood, it's actually really not good for you. And it's naturally supposed to make you gag. It's supposed to make you sick. And it can actually have some really bad bacteria, or you can get diseases from somebody from drinking their blood. So I wouldn't recommend it by any means. But I've done that technique. And I've made it work for me with the energy. Does that mean I'm a vampire of some kind? Does that mean I'm a psychic vampire? I mean, not really. I think that there's different ways that the vampiric energy kind of manifests in people, and some people can use the energy, or use these psychic vampiric techniques, or use the sanguine techniques, or use other vampiric techniques to feed on energy. I think that people can do that, but some people have a greater ability to do these, and perhaps a greater need to do these things, a greater need to take in energy in these ways, whether it be sanguine, whether it be psychic, what have you. I've met a few people who are either sanguine vampires or psychic vampires, or some combination of the two. Now, the combination of the two, because usually if you can make a sanguine vampiric technique work, you're going to be able to make a psychic vampiric technique work. But I've met a few people who use these techniques, and they seem pretty legit. Now, it's possible we're all crazy, but but I've used both sanguine and psychic vampirism techniques to replenish my energy, and I can feel really good. But I don't need to. You might have that craving, a little bit of a craving, but I don't need to. Now, there's some people who really have the craving. They might not need to drink blood or to use these psychic vampirism techniques, but man, the craving is there. That fragmentation on their astral body, that alteration of their spirit, that kind of hole in it that needs to be filled by another person's energy. that hole is bigger, that crack is bigger, that pain, that craving is bigger to fix it, to fix that problem in that way. For some people, I met one person where it was the person has very strong craving, and she's pretty remarkable in a number of ways. But anyway, I think that vampires exist, just not like they do in the movies. Now, what happens in the movies is blown way out of proportion. I mean, like they kind of comment on certain things, like in the sun. I mean, that also goes back to hemophilia, and people who have hemophilia are like very sensitive to sunlight, and that's where a lot of people think that the idea of vampires comes from. A lot of people that think that vampires comes from like these ancient lineages of kings and counts, if not in Transylvania, around Transylvania. There is some interesting draconic connections with some vampire lineages and the history there. I only know a little bit about it, so I can't really go into the history part of it, or sometimes people just think about vampirism in terms of these draconic bloodlines that go back to when the earth was made, or when it was just forming, when life was coming about on this planet. I don't know enough about that to talk about that aspect of vampires. But let's move on to another supernatural, let's move on to another supernatural entity. And by the way, you can ask me any questions you want if you have any, or want to recommend an entity or some kind of occurrence or ghosts or anything like that. Dogmen. I actually hadn't heard of dogmen until about 2 years ago. I was like, this sounds fake as hell. Apparently, I'll paint a picture for you. So, people who have houses out in the woods, let's make it a mansion. No, let's not make it a mansion. That's too corny. People who have houses out in the woods. So, if they're deep in the woods, or they're kind of like off to the side, they're not around big population centers. Not all people in the woods, but these certain occurrences. So, in these reports, you'll hear these reports of this fog rolling and coming, just coming seemingly from nowhere. Usually fog comes from a direction, but seemingly just like forms around a house in the woods, and this fog just comes out of the ground, or just out of like another dimension. It's weird, just forms, and then after the fog's there, the smart people, the ones who are making these reports, kind of know what it is. They close their doors, they lock them, and then they hear these weird, like scruffy, scratching noises just on the ground, and these sniffing, not necessarily like at the doors yet, not necessarily on top of the house yet, not necessarily like right against the walls yet, but they hear like these sounds like dogs looking for something, and they're rooting around, and slowly they start to hear them get closer to the house, and then they'll start scratching, and they'll make little dog noise and stuff like that, and you'll hear them on the roof, you'll hear them out from outside of the walls, outside of the door, scratching, and they can get in. They don't have to be let in, but as long as you have the door locked, they're not necessarily there for you in particular. If you go outside, they might get you. But people who have looked out their window and seen, seen these creatures, at least part of them, bits and pieces of them. It's pretty dark. It's not like there's light around, but they usually report some kind of portal off to the side, like some kind of where the light is coming from. There's like this glowing gateway where it's kind of like either a solid light or just a little line of light, and there's just fog all around, and there's they see like the outsides of the edges of these forms, and then eventually these beings will just go back, make their way back to the gate, but the light doesn't really illuminate these dog-like beings, where they kind of look like really tall men with long legs, long arms, and outlines of dog heads. And eventually these beings make their way into the gateway or the portal or whatever. People just see the outlines of these beings. There's enough reports of them, and hey there, demagogue. Also, how's my mic, by the way? I can't really hear how I sound. If anybody wants to let me know, because I can see me. My camera's kind of bad, since so a little staticky. But if anybody wants to let me know how my mic is, that'd be good. At any rate, so there's enough of these reports that okay, cool. There's enough of these reports that that line up from different regions around the world, from different areas, and there's always in the woods, and the details line up really well. Um, and there's been disappearances in some of these cases, and these cases they're not like super numerous, but there's enough details that match up that it's like, oh, are these a thing? Um, so my personal opinion, I think that I'll just tell you right off the bat. I think that 90 to 99% of supernatural reports are BS and people are just making stuff up or they're being super paranoid. But I think that there's a small amount, just in general. I think that there's enough around, like even just dogmen, to make them like a viable thing. Now, what do I think that they could be, and what do other people think that they are? What I think that dogmen are, which is not a sentence that a sane person usually says, but what I think that they are is sometimes sometimes gateways between dimensions just sometimes they open up. Think about the multiverse and how many different universes. Yeah, I can talk about skinwalkers. Uh, yeah, I yeah I can do that. But with dogmen, I think about the multiverse. So you have all these different universes, and you have these. Think of it like a tree, like Yggdrasil. Think about all these branches, all these little like there's like smaller dimensions, there's bigger dimensions. In the astral realm, in the astral plane, it's said that all the universes in the astral realm are much bigger, and there's more of them than in the material realm. There's multiple material universes, but regardless, along this tree, little portals sometimes they open up, and it's not so much that they're different parts of the tree. You got to think about it like fifth dimensionally. So every dimension is existing in the same place all at once, but sometimes that fifth dimension or that fourth dimension, sorry, that fourth dimension kind of pierces the third dimension of our reality, and things can kind of like bleed into this dimension, and kind of portals can open up and things can come in. So these dogmen, from the reports, it doesn't seem like they're just flooding in and they're just trying to like tear stuff apart. It's almost like they're guarding these portals, these gateways that open up. It's almost like they're very territorial around the gateways, but they don't really want to they don't want to hang out in our dimension or our universe. It just seems like they come around and they look around and guard the gateways, because it just seems like they're very territorial around the gateway. Because think about it, as above, so below. So every animal it might have an equivalency in other dimensions. But if dog men, and they might from a different dimension, sounds nuts, I know. If dog men from another dimension have something like a dog head or some kind, they sound like dogs, they have a dog personality, they seem to guard these areas. They just seem to like guard the gateways. They just seem to be like, oh shit, there's something that's opened. Let me guard around it because this until it closes, because this shouldn't happen. And it doesn't seem to trap them there. So I think that they just guard these portals to make sure that nobody like comes through, and they might be transdimensional beings who like go along the world tree and just come out and guard the portals and then go back in when they're not needed anymore. They don't seem any more than that to me, and I don't know enough other details to go on that, and I've been going on with that for long enough. Skinwalkers. So there's a lot of stuff in for Native Americans. I know less about Native American stuff, even though I'm 30% Native American. I know more about voodoo, but there's certain entities in voodoo or people like basically a bokor, usually somebody who practices black magic and voodoo. And voodoo encompasses everything, so everything's going to be in it. There's a spirit that Satan has his own equivalency. Bondier is kind of like the source, but there's also saint equivalents, and there's also like Jesus equivalents. There's everything is in. Think of voodoo like Hinduism. Everything is in it. It encompasses everything. It's as pluralistic as Hinduism. But in Vodou, Bokors, they not all of them, but some of them, they kind of, in exchange for certain powers, they offer, I don't want to say pieces of their soul. They offer pieces of, it's almost like their emotional connection to humanity. You could say their spirit, more like their life force. They care about more the ego, so they offer pieces of their life force for certain powers that only an ego would kind of want. Very similar to like a lich, anyway. But I read this in a couple of Vodou books, and I've talked to some people in Vodou about this. But when they offer a piece of their life force, and it takes away their piece of their humanity, it takes away a piece of their, hey there, it takes away a piece of their connection to humanity, and really like their compassion. At any rate, what some Bokors can do when they make this offering, and it's not like you can just do it out of nowhere. Not like you can just hit up Satan and be like, "Hey, can I offer a piece?" And it's not with Satan per se. It's with the darker side of what we are. It's with the deeper, darker part of our ego. When we can contact that, deep in our shadow, when we can contact that, get to know that, there's certain things that can happen. But when they do this ritual and they contact these beings, they offer that piece of themselves. They can alter people's perception of them easier, and they can kind of transform partially physically. Now, you have to be very powerful to transform in the way that you see in movies. Like it's usually BS. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to sound like BS, and it's fine. You have to believe me. But um, actual physical transformations can happen. They're just very, very rare. Skinwalkers or anything like that, or somebody who can transform a little bit, or alter perception, or take on the scent, or the speed, agility, the kind of animal nature of a different, like an animal, but stronger, combined with your human intelligence, and kind of like a bigger version of like think of a werewolf, like a wolf into a werewolf. So it's like a really strong dog, or a really strong like coyote type thing, and they can use that energy technique of feeding on people's energy in that form, and their stomach is transformed, their physiology is transformed enough to where they might be able to feed on people and just really eat a bunch of somebody. Probably not the whole body, that'd be nuts. I mean, but um, uh, they can eat, and they can consume, and they can almost get high and feel this invigoration to consume another person in this form. And you know, back when I was talking about sanguine vampirism, they can do that, but just to a greater extent. But there's a whole lot of downsides, and there's a whole lot of pain. There's a whole lot of pain in the transformation when you go back, and also, you ever feel really depressed and you just feel empty inside? They feel that, but on like a much more intense level, and they their only purpose is to enjoy, and they start to enjoy what the feeding that they crave. I don't know if that's skinwalkers, but it's very similar. Um, Next, I'll go into Bigfoot. So this is a lot of this is going to sound similar, because I got a whole lot of what I believe and think about is dimensions, portals, different layers, different forms of consciousness, different vibrations. Um, Bigfoot. What's the pearl of Bigfoot? I don't think it's just one thing. Big feet. No. Anyway, Bigfoot. Whatever this is, there's no way it knows itself as Bigfoot. Um, so I think most Bigfoot sightings, once again, most sightings and most reports are BS. Like 99%, 90 to 99% of all supernatural reports, or even memories, which is scarier because our memory isn't reliable. It's BS. But there's enough in there to where I'm like, yeah. So with Bigfoot, I think that it's how do I say this? So I think it's traveling through dimensions. Otherwise, we would have found the bodies and things like that. And it's bones or these things bones. It's not just one thing. There's no way. Um, I think that I got two crazy ideas on it. One is that it's literally us from the past when we were like pre Neanderthal and when we were more connected to magic and we relied on it more before we started devolving or evolving, however you want to look at it. Yeah, it could be just an egregor. I mean, well, so like a lot of things can be egregors. Um, that people have formed gods that are egregors and spirits. So it's like honestly, it's kind of like a egregor is like it's definitely a catch-all. Definitely possible though. But you know, however you think about time, when we were more connected to magic and instinct, and it's us using our instinct before we became more material, when this planet and when the energy was still between forming, and we're poking our heads in here and there. Could be us from a very, 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 very distant past, millions and millions, millions of years ago, or it could be a whole just different dimension that something's coming through. It doesn't seem to be like Dogman in that it guards anything. It just seems like all these reports is the most credible ones to me are like when you see these reports of like these whole groups of men just killed, just ripped apart, and like it's maybe nobody got away, but there's evidence of like something big moving around that doesn't look like any animal, and you're like, well, what killed all of these people? There's enough of those reports just in Louisiana itself to be like, oh my god, what is getting these people? Like, and it hasn't been recent. It hasn't been like super recently. Very rarely recently, like I don't know, maybe in the 80s, but like there's a whole bunch of reports from like I want to say the 1800s through back to the 1600s where of like this exact thing happening, and I'm like, what is? And sometimes there's people that get away and they just comment that it like there's this big like tall thing that was just like screaming, and they always describe the scream the same way, like it was not a monkey's howl, but like somebody who's really angry and terrified all at once and just screaming at the top of their lungs very loudly, which is terrifying. But you know, a few people that get away, and anybody who comes back, they come back with more people, and you know, everybody's like dead and like not necessarily ripped into pieces. That'd be like super strong, but just dead and just ripped and shreds. And they're like, what did this? I mean, this could be like old, you know, if we're talking about 1800s before, could be like just mistaken Native American tribes, and they were just, and the people who were reporting this misremembered, or they don't understand what they saw. That's probably true for a lot of this, to be honest. Uh, so I'm not going to be on for too much longer. So I'm going to go into occurrences, and I've shared these before, but I'd like to share a few of the occurrences. Again, I'll share the one that terrified me the most, because so I wish I still had the list, although because I'd tell you, and I'll find it again. But I have around 2,000 videos, and I had a list of supernatural occurrences in my videos that I didn't notice at the time. Like I didn't notice, but then when I was editing or when I was looking at it, and I've never used like special effects. I use an app on my phone, which is hilarious. As you can tell by my webcam, this is the webcam I have right now. I usually use my iPhone 11 Pro. Anyway, but I'll be editing sometimes some of my graveyard stuff. And then, you know, when I was first started, and then as I progressed, and there will be really weird stuff happening every now and then. It's so rare though. Out of all my graveyard videos, maybe like 7 of them, it's something I heard this like, for instance, when I was in IOF, I had the camera set up. I had my phone set up on my car, tripod next to my car, and the camera was there, my phone. And I went over to, you know, do the thing. I was both gonna gather some grave dirt from this grave for the first time, and also make an offering to the spirits, because I work with a lot of grave dirt, but it's not like I'm digging that deep. I'm not doing anything like illegal. I'm just like getting some dirt off the top, and then, you know, I'm making offering stuff. But the very first time I worked with this one grave that I've worked with a lot since then, I put my little hand shovel thing, and you only see me like a little bit far off, so the camera is not close to me. But I see my arm. When my arm goes into the grave dirt, you hear this right next to the camera. And it's like, it was almost like it was almost like something you would hear in a movie or something when somebody's like going through like the footage that they took. But it was unmistakably almost like not just a something like it's, you know how you play RPGs and you might go into like in a graveyard and you're fighting some kind of like wisp mother, and she makes the, or a banshee or something like that, and there's like this exhale that they sometimes make. Sometimes it's very dramatic and there's like screams, but think of like a really ghostly exhale. That's what I heard in the video, and that, even talking about it, actually kind of makes my hair stand up because I remember that. That was and the funny thing is that I don't know if it scared me per se. It scares me now talking about it, but because I'm kind of like I got a lot of grave dirt around, and I'm kind of in a dark room with red lights on me. But now I'm just scared myself. Anyway, but at the time I was like, oh, I actually made a connection with that spirit. That's cool. And why do some portals take us to empty, dark, empty voids? Is it actually a bad place, or is it a test of our inner solitude? If you've been through a portal, you are, if you're talking about mentally or like physically, if you've physically been through a portal, you are a very, very unique person. Mentally, if you're talking about through magic or through consciousness, totally good. I've done that. These portals, though, a lot of the time, mentally anyway, when we go to these places, we're feeling our own emptiness for the first time when we don't know what to make of it. But yeah. Anyway, when I saw that, after that, I worked with that grave a bunch, and me and that spirit in that grave had a great, how do I say this, a rapport, I guess you could say, because I worked with that grave's energy for a long time. It's one of the first. It was one of the first graves that was in that graveyard. Miss Permella Stroud. There's actually a street named after that family because she had like 14 grandchildren. Next to the cemetery. In the cemetery, she was buried, I think, 18. She was like 85, and she's buried in like 18. I want to say 88, somewhere around there. She was born around 1800, and she lived through the 1800s. She died before 1900, but I feel like there's certain people that have, especially when you have a whole bunch of kids, or when you're in a community for a long time, form ties. It's almost like you form ties with the earth itself, like with the soil and with the energy of the land, the plants, everything. And sometimes these spirits, this our life force. I don't know how many of my videos y'all have watched, but I talk about soul fragmentation, how when we die, there's different parts of ourselves that go different places. Soul can't be confined; it has to keep on going. But the life force that we borrow from the earth, and then there's the ego that should over time just naturally just fade into the grander subconscious. But sometimes the ego can become a ghost. Not always bad. Sometimes the spirit, the life force, can become a ghost when it's seeping back into the earth. There's a reason why graveyards are such good gateways and portals. Is because the earth is taking that life force back into itself. It does that naturally, and when it's doing that, you can be a part of that process, and it's amazing. But I'm getting around my topic. At any rate, sometimes when people form a relationship with a community, with the land, that area, then there's a piece of their spirit that wants to protect, that not necessarily wants to protect it, but wants to watch over it. And usually these pieces of spirit, or these even things that are people that become ghosts, they can't really do much. It takes a really powerful spirit or ghost to do something, to actually affect the material realm. There's a whole lot of stuff just happening below the surface, but to actually affect the material realm, that is like we see in Hollywood, that is something big. Anyway, that's enough about that occurrence. Another occurrence. So there's another occurrence where I straight up saw. It was in this room actually, I've done a lot of spiritual work in this room, a lot of magic in this room, some stupid stuff too. Um, I even had a sanguine experience with a woman in this room, but regardless, it should always be consensual and between adults. So yeah, like we used to drink each other's, but regardless, we used to actually be able to be fed from it, and it's like it feels remarkable. Anyway, so uh, there was one that I was filming in this room, and I was talking about something, and I was talking about dimensions actually, and I was comparing Hinduism and Christianity, and this like ectoplasmic wisp just went right beside me, just went straight up, and it was so it was almost comically a wisp, like it was kind of scary. It was scary, but like, I didn't see it at the time. But when I went back in the video, I was looking at it. I'm like, that's ectoplasm that just went beside me. I was like, it was so not smoke, like it did not look like smoke, and I didn't have anything lit, but it was like a little like wraith, just did a little jig up beside my body and just went from here to up there, and I was just like, what the hell is that? I mean, like that's not a there's no video aberration I've ever seen that looks like a straight up like long piece of like conscious sperm that's just like straight up going up beside me, and I was like, it shook me a little bit, but it was also kind of, you can still see it if you can find the video. I'll try to find this list, and I'll try to give it to y'all at a future date. So I've brought up the list before, and I've showed it before, but who the hell knows where it is now. But I was just like, that was just so comically like Hollywood that I was just like, what the hell is that? That one was just kind of funny, but also really weird. The one that so I'm getting to the thing that scared me. It also involves a way in which I screwed up. So in Denton, Texas, I go to UNT, and there's a graveyard near fairies. I wouldn't mess with fairies, man. I've worked with goblins, but fairies they are foreign and easy to piss off, and their nature, they're so foreign to us, like how they're almost like aliens. Like we don't really they're so alien as far as, and they're so easy to piss off. Um and they get vindictive. I've never worked with them, but there's a reason I've never worked with them. I've worked with goblins, and they're like easy, and they're not. It's a very easy exchange with them. Like give them a little bit of food, and they'll just like they'll help you out with security on your property, or they'll like make sure that no little energies come in when you're doing ritual stuff like that. They can't do anything huge. They're like little tiny like they're. It's not like they're material goblins, like, but like they're little pieces of like quirky little energies, but they're easy to understand and read. With fairies, they're so complicated and they're so easy to piss off that I just never want to mess with them. But I remember in one video, I caught like what I think is like one of the little goblin energies, and it was just like it was like this little flame walking. It was adorable actually in one of the videos, and I caught it in some photographs, but like they're just like little energies that like, but with fairies, I don't want to touch them. Anyway, they're getting to the also, y'all can also ask about other stuff. I don't want to make y'all think that y'all can't ask anything, even though I'm getting to like my last experience here. But and also you can keep in mind that you can recommend on my channel or in the comment section afterward stuff that I can talk about in other live sessions. This is just kind of a trial run, and I'm going to improve over time. So the experience that scared me, Denton in general, there's a big KKK presence in Denton in the 1800s, like a big KKK presence. And there, some students at UNT actually did a bunch of research recently, in like 2 or 3 years ago. And they found, because they were trying to figure out where like 300 ex-slaves during Reconstruction. Like directly after Reconstruction, there's like 300 ex-slaves that just disappeared, and they figured out where they were buried, what graveyard they were buried in, and a lot of these graves are unmarked. Now it is a graveyard, and it's like 30 minutes away from like UNT area into like further out in the country. There's a graveyard there, but there's a whole bunch of unmarked graves in a forest right beside it, and just like in that general area. So I did, I wanted to go there, at night, because that's usually when graveyard, because like usually spirits and ghosts they don't, and just energy in general, they don't like to do stuff when there's a whole bunch of energy just coming down from the sun, but also when there's people around. It makes them nervous, I guess you could say. But anyway, it was like dead of night, and I drove out there. I was like, oh, this is a weird neighborhood. But I wanted to cleanse the graveyard and also make them offerings and make them feel more comfortable and just kind of introduce myself. But when I went there, I took my ghost box, and the ghost box that I even have it right here. I haven't used it in a while, but basically it scans radio stations at high speed, and you'll ask questions, and then sometimes you try to channel the answers through the ghost box. And I don't know if I should even make it work right now, because it's going to take a while to figure out. Anyway, picture that, but it's scanning like multiple stations at once and just going through the stations. Oh God, I hope I can. There we go. Just going through the stations really quickly. I've had some success with it. I've made some videos with it. I've had a lot of success during videos and outside of videos. But anyway, I was using Ghostbox, and I didn't hear anything from it, like anything that made any like sense or like add to my questions. But I did my whole introduction, my whole offering thing, and then I let them speak to the ghost box. I put the ghost box out. Didn't really hear anything that registered for me. Like, okay, that didn't work. And I kept on, I made various offerings, cigars, a cigar, wine, and did some voodoo stuff, some stuff that you're supposed to do for the dead. And I kind of closed everything out. Didn't really counter anything big. I mean, I felt like some kind of weird energy, but I didn't really, feel anything big. And I went back to my car, and then I started to look at the footage from my phone, and I still got the video up on my channel. But I started looking at the footage on my phone, and right when I offered the ghost box to them, like everything sounded straight, and right when I put my hand out and offered the ghost box to them, the video slowed down, hyper slowed down, and then like I heard these like weird long extended answers, but it was like a guttural like voice, just like really deep and like strange and warpy, just speaking while I had the ghost box out. And I was like, oh my God, how long does this go on? And it's almost like they slowed the video down as well, because they made that section so much longer than it was. And right when I got to the end of going through all this, when I took the ghost box back in the video, that's when it returned to normal speed. They slowed their answer down when I was offering them the ghost box, and then when I took it back, then that's when the video returned to normal speed. After that was weird enough, and I didn't know if that was a bad sign or a good sign. I was still relatively new to grave work at that time, working in graveyards and things like that. But I noticed when I was in my car and driving back that I had lumps along my spine. I was like, what is that? And the pain it was like, it was just a little, and keep in mind, in this graveyard, I wasn't like picking up stuff. It's not like I was like digging or like picking heavy stuff up. But like the pain started getting worse and worse and worse when I was driving. And I felt multiple lumps along my spinal, like along the bones that stick out that protrude along your spine. I felt bumps on them, like not like boils, but like muscular swollen bruises along my spine, all these lumps just all along my spine. And it started hurting more and more and more. And, by the time I got back to my house, I got somebody to look at them. They're like, "What did you do to your spine? You got all these lumps along your spine." And I felt like there was probably 3 really big lumps, but there was like over a dozen lumps directly along my like spine where the bones stick out. Like I had all these lumps, and they hurt really bad for about, I want to say it was between 13 and 15 days. But I think maybe on the 14th day, they just went away like that. But it hurt really bad for all these days. I was like, what? And that scared me bad because I've never been injured like that from a graveyard or from any of the spiritual stuff that I've done. I've never gotten lumps along my spine and this really bad pain. And it was so weird. Just like in one day, they were gone. And that experience scared me. It scared me pretty bad. I did go back to that graveyard. I did go back to the graveyard. And I did some more stuff. I tried to make things right. I feel like I pissed them off. Or maybe it was just because I was white and the KKK presence in that area, KKK members had killed them directly after they had been freed and buried them in this place. And maybe I am 10% African, 30% Native American, but I mean, I look very white, and they probably identified me as white, and there was anger, and they had physically harmed me and made these lumps along my spine. I hadn't even thought of that. Maybe I should have thought of that before I went, but I went back, tried to make things right. The same thing happened again, but it wasn't as much pain, and there wasn't as many lumps along my spine, and they didn't hurt as much, and they didn't hurt for as many days, but the same thing happened. I don't know if I think I went back there once again with a friend, and it didn't happen again, but the same thing happened the second time that I went. And the third time I was like, I got to take somebody with me, man. Like these things keep on tearing me up every time I go to this graveyard, and there keeps on being lumps along my spine. I've never even heard of anybody getting lumps, painful lumps along their spine from spirits in a graveyard, but that actually did scare me. Oh yeah, working with Raphael. I actually haven't worked with any daemons or demons, however you want to understand them, or I've worked with Michael, Archangel Michael. I kind of vibe with him okay. I don't really work with demons or angels. It's really not my thing. Or any Middle Eastern gods. I don't work, or old gods like Moloch or Baal or Paimon. I don't, the whole Middle Eastern area. I'm just like I don't dig it, man. Like I don't. Most of the people that I know, they're like, oh yeah, I'm working with Belial. I'm working with Lucifer. I'm working with Satan. I'm working with Paimon. I'm working with this or that angel. I'm like, cool. They're just not my thing. It's fine though. But there's been this huge recurrence recently of working with demons and angels, and it's just like there's this huge recurrence, and then everybody else like in voodoo or in shamanism or in Hinduism is like, oh, y'all are doing it again. But yeah, the whole Middle Eastern, I don't dig anything around there, to be honest. Ma Kali, yeah, she's my number one. What do you work with? Oh, okay. So Ma Kali is the form through which I connect to, feel the light from, and worship the source. I prefer a female form, and she's so vast too. But Ma Kali, number one for me of all time, and will be for all time. Number two is Odin. Been working with both of them, by the way. I feel like I work for them more than with them, though, with Ma Kali and Odin. For over a decade. I should really put on for over a decade. So I'm 31, so probably about 11 years. Odin second, and Odin. It's so Odin's weird. Like Ma Kali, like when you actually feel her. She, by the way, Kali doesn't actually look like she does in the images. It's all symbolic. When you actually see a vision of her, and I can just access because she's my number one. I can access it like immediately, and I can access like a little tiny window into her realm pretty immediately, pretty instantly, like very easily just by looking up and just tuning in. But she's so vast and she's just all light. Like it's almost like you're looking into like what some people think of as Lucifer or like just some people think of as God. Like it's just all this light, but in a certain like female kind of form in her realm around this planet in her lap. There's just like this hue of just like slightly reddish light, but she has a form made out of light. And people, I've had other people that see her connected to me and have described various light forms. She can look scary to certain people though. Odin too. Odin never really feels like a father figure. He feels more like a contractor that you're working for. He's not super warm. But shamanism, northern shamanism, and working through shamanism with Odin, has been remarkable. And there's so much I've channeled with Odin and written down by channeling Odin. Uh, I will say that I work with Hastur though, and a lot of people think Hastur is Leviathan. I don't necessarily agree. I think Hastur's different. Hastur I do vibe with, and he also feels a lot like Odin, which is strange, but a little bit way more chaotic than Odin, because Odin's whole thing is trying to keep everything as stable for as long as possible. He'll do whatever it takes and screw over whoever it takes to allow us to give us a chance to figure out what the hell's wrong with us and to figure everything out. He's given us the biggest chance that we can for as long as that he can. That's his whole thing. That's putting it very simply, but that's Odin's whole thing basically. But he's all kinds of shamanism with him, and that's very vague, but books. Yes, Odin's Way in the Modern World by Wayland Skallagrimson, or Putting on the Wolfskin by Wayland Skallagrimson. He goes into and also Scientific Magic by Wayland Skallagrimson. He's a modern day berserker. He talks a lot about Odin in a way that makes sense and that I found to be true. He's also very intelligent. He writes very intelligently, and he describes going into the berserker state in a scientific and medical way. He talks about combining the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system to achieve the berserker state, and he talks about his experiences. He's a very, very good writer. For a modern day berserker, you usually think of berserkers as like beasts kind of people, but you could be a scholar berserker where you don't even fight. Like you can go into that state and just write. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Also, another book I'd recommend there's a lot of stuff about Raven Caldera. I'll recommend some for Kali too. There's a lot of stuff about Raven Caldera that, like, he might be pretty racist. I don't know though, because I haven't really looked into it. But I will say one book that he has that I've read that it doesn't have anything to do with race or anything like that. He's Northern shamanism, and a lot of his books don't. I mean, like, I've never read any of his books that talk about like, oh yeah, this is racist. But his shamanism book, Weird Walkers, was a really good book about learning about the runes and shamanistic spirits in the northern tradition. But keep in mind that if you talk about Raven Caldera, you might hear that I don't know if he's racist. I really hate racist people, so I hope he's not. But I have found that Weird Walkers is a remarkable book by him. Books for Kali, those are very difficult to find. Ones that don't just talk about her in historical terms. Ones that actually talk about her and connecting to her are really hard to find. Your best luck is Tantra books. Looking for Mahakali, or a lot of the Tantra books, like, they seem dark on the exterior, but they're actually connecting you to her. And once you get deeper within, then that's when you make the connection to the light within her. But I think that there's one that I'd recommend that just talks about Kali in general that I'd recommend, but it's not great for actually connecting to her. Is I think it's called Book of Kali, and it has a tapestry of her on the front with a red background, and it has her holding the head. And I talk about Kali so much, but I guess I'll mention that the heads around her neck, they can represent the different letters of the Sanskrit alphabet, and her representing her that she masters language. Language doesn't master her. She's known to destroy it, to kill demons, and to coat herself with their blood and drink their blood. In Hinduism, you can call them rakshasas, or any spirits that try to harm humanity, or try to delude us, or try to bring us away from realizing ourself or enslave us. Um, you can just think of it as ignorance. She's slaying ignorance. Um, I think that somebody just messaged me about this. Okay, so yeah, but also, when she's holding the head, that's specifically the demon of desire. I can't remember what his name is, but demon of desire. And it said that all the gods prayed to Ma Kali to get rid of this, because every time they slash this demon or cut off his head, and like anytime a drop of blood from this thing would come out of him, another demon would pop up. So they're like, oh, what do we do? And so all the gods, all the demigods, and I think Vishnu as well, prayed to Kali and to come and like save them. And she came and she just consumed this whole demon and land. And she was the only one able to process what this demon was and then make it a part of herself without it changing her or corrupting her. She could just consume it and then process it. Anyway, and also a lot of people think of that demon as desire itself, and it's a metaphor for desire. Like once you satisfy something once, then another desire pops up or another craving pops up. Anyway, what else do I work in? Vodou, the area that I have the most. I wouldn't say the most success, but I have a lot of success in with knowing very little about. I've been working in Vodou for around like seriously. I only started again seriously recently, but there's about 5 or 6 years there where I was working with Papa Legba, Baron Samedi, and other of Vodou Loa. I didn't really have. I learned a lot from books, but I didn't really have until recently, and until much later in my working with these beings, these Loa. Did I actually have contact with other people that did it, and start learning more? I started learning a lot more recently, and I've had a lot of success with Papa Legba. I guess this is a really creepy experience that I think really matches this uh, this video. So I had this Veve of Papa Legba, and it's not respectful for me to take it from its spot and to show you. That's not cool. But there's a Veve that's him for me, and I've had it for 10 years. I made it 10 years ago. I drew it 10 years ago. I'm not really thinking about it too much, but this piece of paper I've had for solid decade, that I made for him. And I didn't think of him as much back then. When I first made it, I was like, oh, he just opens gateways, or oh, he's the one that you offer to at the beginning of rituals. He's probably not that important. Only later on in life did I realize, like, wow, like there's gateways between everything, between me and getting a raise, between me and meeting somebody new. There's gateways between me and taking a pee. There's gateways between everything, and he has all the keys. But he's one of the gatekeepers. He's not like the only gatekeeper. I'm not trying to use anything as being like the one and only. Like when Odin is all father, and he's the all father of all the gods in the Norse pantheon. So you can call your. I usually think of myself sometimes as a Norse polytheist, where like this polytheistic system exists alongside other polytheistic systems, and like there's no problems. But the experience with Papa Legba, and I'll go ahead and end on this. So with Papa Legba, I have this Veve, and I have it up, next to a statue, carved wooden statue from New Orleans, from this lady that hasn't carved any in decades, and she used to carve them all the time, but she hasn't carved any in decades. I think it's from the '60s. Anyway, I have my Veve piece of paper with his sigil or his Veve that I drew on the piece of paper. Put it there. I haven't always had the statue, but I've had this Veve for a long time. Also, I know I'm pretty long-winded in these. This is why I usually don't like to do live streams, because I'm very long-winded and I have to do a lot of retakes. But so this Veve, at some point, I tore it right along the cane. So if you look up a Papa Legba Veve, and you'll see a cane, and I tore it right down the center of this very thin line, which is nuts. I don't know how that happened. And I taped it, but there's always been a crack along the cane there, and like a tear, of course, all the way down. And there was a few times when I would look over, and that tear, that crack, would be bleeding onto my desk, like not just like look over and just see it for a glance. Like I was just staring at it and watching it bleed. I'm like, I gotta be hallucinating. There's no way this is real. And like I literally, that's what I thought. I was like, nah, there's no way this is real. Just I was like looking at it bleed. I'm like, it wasn't like gushing, but it was like drip, 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 drip. I was like, there's no way that's real. And then a few days later, another time, I don't know if it was a few days, but another time, I saw it bleeding again. I was like, because I actually have a high degree of like evidence for things to be real. Like I'm not somebody who just sees something like, oh, that's what I'm seeing. I'm like, I must be hallucinating or something. There's no way that's real. So another time I looked at it, I was like, I'm hallucinating. And then only later on did I realize I was like, what the fuck? There's this red stain along the crack, along the tear, and there's a red stain, and I'm looking at it. And then another day I look at it, and I'm like, it's still stained red, and there's not any like residue or like dried blood on the desk or below it or like even encrusted on the bottom, but right along the crack, it is stained red. And like any day I can look at it and be like, yep, it's still stained red. I'm like, I guess I wasn't hallucinating. And then but what I didn't feel like it was a bad thing. I was like, I actually have a connection to Papa Legba, and Papa Legba is not somebody who hurts other people per se. He's usually the one that opens good gateways, and that's why you want to get him on your side. But I was like, wow, this is like, I can touch something that was bleeding from another realm. I don't know, but it's still stained red, and I'm just like, how did that happen? That's nuts. That's crazy. And I think it was more like a dimensional terror, and he was giving me kind of a sign. At any rate, I hope y'all enjoyed this. I've been going on for a little over an hour now. If y'all want me to do these more in the future, I will. I want to get a better webcam, and I'll check the sound, and I'm gonna hate myself if I go back and I listen to it and the sound's bad. Ugh, I hate when the sound's bad. Like the picture's bad, but the sound, I'm just like, ah. But yeah, if y'all want me to do more of these, feel free to comment on my channel. Give this video a like if you like this video at all. Feel free to comment in the comment section below on this video once it's posted for any recommendations or any requests. And you can become a patron on Patreon, and you can support my work, my spiritual work, and yeah, for sure. Sothoth. But yeah, feel free to become a patron if y'all want to at patreon.com/darkrealist, capital D, capital R. And if you go to my Patreon, just give me $1 a month, and I give extra ritual information, as well as offer all my YouTube videos and podcasts in one place. And then I share some ritual information that I don't share anywhere else, and ritual pictures. Once again, patreon.com/darkrealist, capital D, capital R. At any rate, thank you very much, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Where are you? There you are.